loss in 2006, running away from a career and an institution he'd once loved.
I didn't want to go bankrupt. I didn't want people to think I was stealing. My worry wasn't the post office, my worry was my family. That was my worry. Yeah. And even having to come back and tell my family that I'd been prosecuted for embezzlement or sent to jail.
And the political fallout unfold across the news. And like so many sub-postmasters, he finally had to speak out.
That money.
I emailed the BBC and after watching that programme, because I was so upset, I just needed to say something to somebody. I was post office, do you get me? I was post office. I loved the job and they killed it for me with their stupid bloody IT system.
Well, our thanks to Robert for getting in touch. He was speaking to our reporter Jane McCubbin.
So today, the attention turns once again to the inquiry. We're going to hear from Fujitsu, and the journalist Nick Wallis is there. Nick's been following this story for many years, has been ahead of the curve. He wrote that book, The Great Post Office Scandal, and joins us now. Morning, Nick. What are you going to be listening out for when Fujitsu take the stand today?
Any sense of accountability about what their IT system has done to thousands of lives. I think it's really important that Fujitsu are being properly questioned, both at the inquiry and later at the select committee, where executives will be put on the spot by a number of MPs, because frankly they haven't said very much at all since the High Court case came down in favour of the sub-postmasters in 2019. The most comprehensive reply to any MP's questions was a letter written back in 2020, which dodged a lot of the questions that were asked, and because of course it wasn't a live environment, 2020 being a time when select committee hearings were suspended in order to cope with the pandemic. This is now the first opportunity, both at the inquiry and in Parliament, where there will be this opportunity to find out what Fujitsu have been thinking and doing to remediate the situation that they partly created.
And Nick, obviously we've seen from lots of the reports the anguish, the devastation that these people have been left in. What do the victims of this whole scandal need to make them feel like there's some kind of resolution from Fujitsu when they hear them talk today?
Well, Fujitsu provided witnesses in the prosecution of innocent sub-postmasters. There's a police investigation going on into what Fujitsu knew or didn't know. For them to actually put aside their corporate responsibility, or their corporate responsibility to their shareholders effectively, and say to the victims, we are doing something about this, we will find out who was giving false information, and we will either pass on that information to the police, or we will do something about this internally if those people have been misleading rather than involved in criminal activity. Because at the moment it doesn't seem like Fujitsu is doing much. They're hiding behind a corporate defence, which they put up from 2019 and have maintained ever since. And they've, to some extent, allowed the post office to take the majority of the flak. Now, you can say that that's certainly the post office mainly to blame for what's happened in this case, but it was Fujitsu's IT system. They knew it wasn't fit for purpose when they rolled it out. Sub-postmasters caught it in the neck when Fujitsu failed to make that system fit for purpose. And so I think that's why there is such public anger about Fujitsu's role in this and why they need to be answering questions today.
And that IT system, although now repaired, is still in post offices across the country, isn't it? And Fujitsu's still getting other big government contracts.
Yeah, Fujitsu, I think, are going to take more than £2 billion out of the Horizon IT system over the lifetime of this contract. And Fujitsu warned that if the government didn't accept the Horizon system when it was having problems before it was rolled out, it could actually cause Fujitsu UK to fold as an organisation. Fujitsu have since built an IT system and an empire in this country on the broken backs of sub-postmasters. And it's also a very litigious organisation. After the government binned it off an NHS contract in the mid-2000s, it sued the government for £896 million and walked away after secret arbitration with £400 million. So how it's going to now respond to whatever MPs and this inquiry say to it about future contracts will be very interesting.
And we're also going to hear from the Post Office, aren't we? What do you think we can expect to hear from their conversations with MPs?
Well, the Chief Executive, Nick Reed, has peddled a nice line in contrition over the last 3 years, but behind the scenes, the Post Office has been aggressively litigating when it comes to compensation payments. It created a mess of a compensation scheme which is still being unravelled. And just last week, I was able to obtain a tape which featured the current Director of Communications of the Post Office. He's since been suspended, insinuating that a lot of campaigning sub-postmasters did have their hands in the till, and stating, for the record, that the Horizon IT system had never been proved to cause a discrepancy in sub-postmasters' accounts, which was misrepresenting a High Court judgment. So what the Post Office is saying publicly, a lot of sub-postmasters are now just simply disbelieving because of what we're hearing about what they're doing behind the scenes.
Nick, thank you very much indeed. Nick Wallis there, and I do recommend Nick's panoramas that he's made over the last few years and a podcast that he made about the great Post Office scandal. The panoramas on the iPlayer, the podcast is on BBC Sounds. Yeah,
he has been following the story for a long time. All the detail is there. John is here with this morning's sport, and we're starting with tennis. And
yes,
it's very